one car brand made history. Another burned $350 million and became the punchline of an entire industry. What separated them wasn't money, wasn't engineering. It was one decision, made at one specific moment. And it happened in every single era. Same decision, different cars, same result. Every generation of car buyers has had a brand they loved and a brand they couldn't believe existed. A name that meant something real, and a name that meant nothing but trouble. The gap between them has never come down to budget or engineering talent or factory size. It's come down to exactly one thing: whether the company actually cared about the person buying the car. Go back to the 1950s. America was booming. World War II was over. The economy was roaring, and people wanted cars that matched how they felt. Big, bold, chrome-covered machines that said one thing: we made it. Nobody delivered that feeling better than Chevrolet. The 1955 Chevy Bel Air didn't just sell well. Chevrolet moved over 1.7 million vehicles that year alone. The Bel Air was sharp, it was affordable, and it put something aspirational in a driveway that had never had one. Then came the Corvette, America's first proper sports car, priced at under $3,500, doing 0 to 60 faster than almost anything else on public roads. Chevy wasn't just building family haulers anymore. It was building the car your neighbor couldn't stop staring at. By the end of the decade, Chevrolet had become the most trusted name on American roads. Not the flashiest, the most trusted. Those are two very different things. But while Chevy was building that trust, Ford was busy destroying its own. In 1957, Ford launched the Edsel. 4 years of development, massive pre-launch hype, an advertising campaign that promised America something they'd never seen. And when the curtain finally dropped, people hated it. Critics called the front grille a toilet seat. That wasn't a joke on a blog. That was the actual comparison appearing in major newspapers. But the looks weren't even the worst part. Transmissions failed randomly. Push-button controls jammed constantly. Dealers were too embarrassed to keep them prominently displayed. By 1960, Ford killed the Edsel after just 3 model years, having lost roughly $350 million. In today's money, that's somewhere north of $3 billion. The Edsel didn't just fail. It became the single most famous product disaster in automotive history. A word that still means failure 60 years later. 1 decade. 2 completely opposite outcomes. And the 1970s would prove it wasn't a coincidence. The oil crisis hit in 1973 and flipped the entire market overnight. Gas lines stretched around city blocks. Politicians debated fuel economy on live television. Massive American V8s suddenly felt completely wrong. The brands that adapted quickly survived. Porsche was one of them. The 911 had existed since 1963. But the 1970s is when it became a genuine legend. While other manufacturers were slapping smaller engines into unchanged, bloated cars and calling it adaptation, Porsche was doing the opposite. Refining, sharpening, making every model year meaningfully better than the last. The 911C that arrived in 1978 was lighter, more responsive, and more rewarding to drive than almost anything else on the market. Waiting lists stretched 6 months or longer. By the end of the decade, the 911 had devoted fans on every continent. Today, a well-preserved 1970s example regularly sells for over $100,000 at auction. Not because of nostalgia, because a car that rewards every corner and every gear change doesn't have an expiry date. Then is the Ford Pinto, and this story goes beyond just a bad car. Ford's engineers discovered that the Pinto's rear-mounted fuel tank could rupture in a rear-end collision. An internal cost analysis was conducted. Fixing the design flaw would cost $11 per car. $11. The math said lawsuits would cost less, so the fix didn't happen. Between 1971 and 1980, the Pinto was reportedly linked to at least 27 deaths from fuel fire accidents. Ford recalled 1.5 million vehicles in 1978. The damage went beyond lawsuits, beyond headlines. The Pinto became permanent, textbook proof that some companies viewed their customers as a line item rather than a human being. Porsche built for the driver. Ford ran the numbers and shipped the car anyway. By the 1980s, an entirely new kind of threat was about to prove that lessons still hadn't been learned industry-wide. The The 1980s introduced a new competitive threat: reliability. Japanese manufacturers had quietly figured out something Detroit hadn't fully accepted. The best car isn't the fastest or the flashiest, it's the one that starts every single morning without an argument. Toyota understood this better than anyone else on the planet. The Corolla had been around since 1966, but by the 1980s it had become the best-selling car in the world, a title it would reclaim multiple times over the following decades. By the 2020s, Toyota had moved over 50 million Corollas globally. The Camry held a best-selling sedan title in America for 15 of the next 20 years. Toyota owners came back, not once, decade after decade. The brand didn't shout its way into relevance. It just kept showing up every morning, every winter, every 100,000 miles, until the argument was over. At the same time, Yugo pulled into America in 1985 with a sticker price of $3,990, the cheapest new car ever sold in the United States. And for a brief optimistic moment, that felt like a real breakthrough for budget buyers. What nobody mentioned up front was what those buyers were actually getting. The Yugo broke down with astonishing consistency. Heaters barely functioned in cold weather. Doors didn't always seal properly. Finding replacement parts was its own separate ordeal. Consumer Reports ran out of measured ways to describe the experience. By 1992, the company had collapsed, but the jokes, those just kept going. In 2007, Time magazine placed the Yugo on its list of the 50 worst cars of all time. Former owners still joke that it came equipped with a rear window defroster, just to keep their hands warm while pushing it down the road. Toyota built customers for life. Yugo built a punchline, and heading into the 2000s, the industry was about to split in exactly the same direction all over again. The 2000s arrived with SUV culture running at full volume, and no brand represented that excess more loudly than Hummer. What started as a military vehicle became a civilian status symbol, with the H2 launching in 2002 and delivering roughly 10 miles per gallon on a good day in the city. As fuel prices climbed and environmental conversations grew louder, Hummer became the easiest target in the industry. Protesters showed up at dealerships. Comedians barely needed a setup. The cultural rejection was total. By 2010, General Motors killed the brand entirely after a planned sale to a Chinese buyer collapsed. Hummer didn't just go out of business. It became the symbol of an era the entire industry wanted to forget. BMW, in that exact same period, was collecting a completely different kind of attention. The E46 3 Series, produced from 1998 through 2006, moved over 3 million units and became the most awarded sports sedan of its generation. Automotive press across every major market called it the benchmark, not a contender, the benchmark, and drivers who owned one would tell you the same thing without being asked. That rear-wheel drive balance, that steering weight. For young professionals who just started earning real money, a BMW 3 Series in the driveway meant something specific, that you'd worked for something real, and you cared about more than just getting from one place to another. Hummer sold an image, BMW sold an experience, and when the culture shifted, only one of those survived. Now the present, the electric era. And the contrast here is the sharpest one in this entire video. When the Tesla Model S launched in 2012, the automotive world had no real framework for what it was looking at. An electric sedan with over 300 miles of range, over-the-air updates that improved the car after you already owned it. A 17-inch touchscreen at a time when legacy manufacturers were still debating whether to add a second USB port. By 2023, Tesla was delivering over 1.8 million vehicles globally in a single year. Whatever your opinion on Elon Musk, the product did something no automaker had managed in decades. It made electric vehicles genuinely aspirational. It forced every legacy brand to rethink its entire timeline. And it changed the direction of the entire industry. But for every Tesla, there's always a Fisker waiting in the wings. Henrik Fisker launched his first company in 2011 with the Karma, a plug-in hybrid that turned heads everywhere it appeared. It also had chronic electrical problems and quality issues that no amount of gorgeous design could cover. Fisker Automotive went bankrupt in 2013. Most assumed the story ended there. It didn't. Fisker came back as Fisker Inc. with the Ocean SUV, generating genuine excitement from buyers who had no idea what had happened the first time. Early reviews praised the design. Pre-orders came in strong. Then the software started failing. Service couldn't keep up. Deliveries fell apart. By mid-2024, Fisker Inc. filed for bankruptcy a second time. Again, same founder, same result. 10 years apart. Chevrolet, Porsche, Toyota, BMW, Tesla, all of them built for the person sitting in the seat. Not for the shareholder meeting, not for the cost analysis, for the actual driver. Edsel, Pinto, Yugo, Hummer, Fisker, all of them failed at that exact same point for the exact same reason. The moment they stopped building for the buyer and started building for something else, the buyer stopped coming back. Every car company on earth knows this principle. Most of them agree with it in their boardrooms. Almost none of them follow it under pressure. And that gap between knowing and doing is where reputations have been built and destroyed for 100 years straight. It didn't start with cars, and it won't end with them either. That's a human problem, and it has never once changed. Subscribe if this is the kind of story you're here for. New one every week.